So today we'll be looking at how to size a battery storage system for a home solar setup. It's a question I often get asked is how much battery storage should I be adding? And it's important to understand that you need to consider what your objectives are in adding battery storage. Are you looking for a couple of hours of load shifting, an hour of backup in case of a power cut? When I ask those questions, that normally prompts a question like, well, how much battery storage do you have? Well, in front of you, you can see that I have got 4 9 kilowatt hour batteries. They're LFP batteries, which equates to 36 kilowatt hours in total. Now, that might sound like a lot, but I am trying to get as close to possible as I can to being off grid. And I haven't used any power for the last 7 months from the grid. However, sizing a battery system to get you through the hours of darkness is not straightforward. So that's what we're going to be looking at in detail today. The first thing to do is to determine what your load is during the night. What load you need to cover from the batteries. Now, I have a device that uses CT clamps to monitor power usage in real time for the house and also for my EV charging. I have a video on that and on my whole solar system, and I'll put links in the description below. An easy example would be to assume a 1 kilowatt load per hour. That is 1 kilowatt hour for every hour of darkness. Now remember that this is just an assumption for example purposes only. So the next thing we need to determine is how many hours will the house be running off the batteries. This will vary from summer to winter. It's pretty easy to find out how many hours of darkness you have at your latitude, but this does not mean that you only need to cover, let's say you have 12 hours of daylight and you think, oh, I only need to cover 12 hours of nighttime usage. But it's really best to ignore the first and the last hour, because that's when your first hour is when your solar is ramping up, and as you get towards dusk, your solar system will not be producing at its optimum rate. In the example we discussed at the beginning of the video, we said we would use 1 kilowatt hour for every hour of darkness, and 12 hours of sunshine really equates to 14 hours that we need to cover with battery storage. So instead of 12 kilowatt hours to get us through the night, we should really be looking at 14 kilowatt hours. So in this example, we are probably looking at 2 of my 9 kilowatt hour batteries, giving us total storage of 18 kilowatt hours. But there's another factor that we need to consider, and that is depth of discharge. And what depth of discharge means that we cannot use all 18 kilowatt hours. We can't use 100% of the batteries. And with a lithium chemistry for the batteries, we're really looking at 80% depth of discharge. So our 18 kilowatt hours of battery storage has now dropped down to 14.4 kilowatt hours. There is another factor to consider with depth of discharge. As I have said, lithium is normally good for an 80% depth of discharge. However, your inverter may have its own idea as to what the depth of discharge of your batteries should be. Microwatt inverters will stop discharging from lithium batteries when they get to 22% state of charge. So let's plug those numbers into our calculator. So the inverter depth of discharge for lithium, well, with microwatt inverters, is 78%. So if we were to look at our 18 kilowatt hours of storage, multiply that by 78, we are left with a usable storage of only 14.04 kilowatt hours. Another factor that we must consider is the efficiency of the inverters. The power in the batteries is DC power from our solar panels, and that needs to be converted by the inverter into AC power so that we can use that in the house. According to the datasheet for my inverters, they have a peak efficiency of 93%. Obviously this may drop lower than this, but let's just use 93% for now. So our 14.04 kilowatt hours has now dropped down to 13.06 kilowatt hours due to the efficiency loss in the inversion process. Another factor that is often overlooked is that the inverters themselves require power to run, and this is not included in the calculation of inverting efficiency. The power used by the inverters is not included in the household load calculations either, which is measured after power has been sent from the inverters. In my case, the Growatt inverters have a no-load power consumption of 60 watts. Obviously, while they're inverting, they will probably use more power than this. But let's just use 60 watts for now. 60 watts per inverter, and if we had two inverters, that would be 120 watts per hour. Over our 14 hours, the lost power would come to 1.68 kilowatt hours. So our original 18 kilowatt hours of two 9 kilowatt hour batteries has now dropped to 11.38 kilowatt hours of usable power. So we will probably need 3 and not 2 of the 9 kilowatt hour batteries.